All right, today is one of the rare movies we're talking about that both of us have a copy of. We both do, so we're sharing it right now. So,
yeah, so we're a couple of brick-headed guys with a couple copies of Brick.
I knew you did.
We're going to talk about, what, Rian Johnson's first movie?
Rian Johnson's first movie, yes. And I want to just mention before we begin, noirs. I love noirs. This is kind of a noir. But people, and it's kind of my fault. I like because of the aesthetics, the style, the look, the kind of the glance of noirs gets the selling point. But I think what really captures noirs, especially when you critique like Maltese Falcon, dialogue. Dialogue is key, and dialogue has its own nature in its own world. And Brick is very much of one of those where the dialogue is almost in its own nature. You almost have a dictionary for it. What are they talking?
Yeah, subtitles, slow talking if you can decrease the speed a little bit.
Yeah.
But the important thing is we got some dialogue to talk about today, and we've got a director that's never caused controversy. So join us for Brick. And welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for finding us. And for our loyal fans, thank you once again for continuing to support the show. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great options. Maybe if you click down, we can critique more Rian Johnson films. This is his debut. This is Brick.
Yeah, so when high school student Brendan Fry speaks with his missing ex-girlfriend, Emily Kostic, she makes reference to a bad brick, the pin, and tug before fearfully hanging up. As Brendan uncovers clues about Emily's whereabouts and the meaning of these terms, he falls deeper into a pit of crime and danger surrounding him at every turn.
So right, noir, I'll put this in the category of neo-noir. Yeah. I don't like a noir, but this is kind of like elements of noir. This is Rian Johnson. He wrote this right after he was done film school. And he took him 10 years to develop. That's why I think when you watch this movie, it says it's made in 2007. It has a look and feel of mid-90s.
Yeah, it's kind of got like how like Superbad came out in the 07, but it had that feel of like 90s kind of like nostalgic comedy. This has like 90s kind of dialogue, situations, and yeah, you use the term neo-noir, and it's, I don't want to make fun of it, but when people say like elevated horror, this kind of felt like elevated noir, where it was like taking it somewhere differently, like trying to like elegantly translate the genre in some interesting ways.
It's great writing. I think great character name Brendan. He doesn't really sound like it's almost like he can navigate both ends. Brendan is kind of like a soft kind of a name, not really harsh, but he's on his own little world. But he seems to navigate in every different groups.
Yeah, he's kind of. I mean, I would see myself in high school not as like full Brendan, but as kind of like in that realm of like I never had like excessive bullies, but like I was in a lot of groups. I was like kind of like filtering through a lot of different people, and like I had different groups for different things that I enjoyed in my life. And that's kind of how like high school is, you cling to the people that have like one thing in common with you around a circle. And I think that it's funny because again, this being my first time watching the movie, I've always just referred to Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Brick, like that's his character name. That's not his name at all. But yeah, Brendan Fry is a very unassuming name. He's an unassuming character though too. He's got the glasses. He doesn't look like he's looked up. He's kind of just trying to like look down. All of his dress wear.
The camera does look down a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the foot groundwork. Yeah. Almost like you keep your nose to down.
And I'd read that Rian Johnson was a fan of Cowboy Bebop, the anime, and so he styled his hair and kind of outfit to look kind of like our lead character from Bebop. So not something I took with me at the initial set, but there's a lot of those little instances where like Rian Johnson liked this moment from a movie. He liked this scene from a movie, and he kind of he doesn't get that kind of like level where Tarantino, where it's like very obviously taken elements, but he picks a lot of odd choices from different movies and kind of creates a mash with all of them.
So you have elements of like a little bit of a clues. You got dialogue. You got him being forced into this, right? His ex-girlfriend, who obviously you real why she broke up with him. He pretty much tattletaled on her best friend.
Well, he seems like a lot to handle as a character. Like he seems like he's a bit much.
But he's almost seems like an adolescent Sam Spade, where he knows this is going to be a problem. Knows it's not going to be resolved. And please, for God's sake, instead of keeping the police away, keep the school administration away from me while I do this. And then he's got this psychic brain, which I really love. It's kind of a cliche, but how you play cliches is really well developed.
Yeah, and again, like there comes in some elements, or I've read some people online that believe that brain is not real. That it's like part of his subconscious that he deals with.
Right, because brain doesn't really interact.
He doesn't interact with anyone else. He's always in like the same spot, really. And Rian Johnson never gave credence to that, but I said on a forum, he goes, "This is my favorite thing I've ever read about this movie was that brain might not be real." I also like that, like you said, I like that it's shifted to a school setting. Now that's a win for me, but it also creates opportunities where the film, I think, doesn't reach that level. It doesn't feel like we're at a school environment. We never see Brendan in classes. We never see him
or anybody.
Like again, he almost doesn't exist because he interacts with everybody, but then he's not really like a student. I almost got the feeling that he was doing a 21 Jump Street thing at some point because he kind of that altercation with him and Richard Roundtree's character VP Truman. When they're interacting, it does sound very much like keep the school off my back while I get this done. And I was kind of like, is he actually in school or is he undercover or something? Like I couldn't really like suss out what was going with that.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. I just don't know if they really reached that level.
Right, and I'm not really spoiling anything because Brendan's character did rat on one of his Emily's conscious. That's her name, Nick's girlfriend's best friend. He was supplying drugs and he was part of the colonel. And then she goes to their kind of clique group and abandons him. And then that's how he gets accolades from the administration. And then the administration's like, you did us a solid. And he's like, will you leave me alone? Right. I'm not your pigeon stool. If you suspend, instead of Sam Spade saying you want to write me up and throw me in jail, he's like, you want to suspend me or what are you doing?
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
Go ahead and do it. So there's a lot of very much Sam Spade in this movie. That's probably why I like it very much.
Yeah, and there's even like that wonder of are they all these images of birds in the background meant to be like a falcon reference or like kind of
right. She
wears there's a lot of characters, and I know that he was inspired by Dashiell Hammett, and he was inspired by the same books actually that the Coen brothers got from Dashiell Hammett as well. So you can see a lot of those similarities in some of their early work as well.
Yeah. Which is a great noir. Where I can't. She just blurts out, "I can't trust you. You have done nothing for me to."
Yeah. Exactly. Like. That's where I think the school element works really well is the students. I think all of the students, with the exception of Brendan not going to classes, all of the students feel like lived-in characters where like I could see them going to a school. I knew people like each one of these people. And that's where the school environment really wins out. It's a wide cast of characters that you can find yourself understanding. And then of course some Rian Johnson flares like our character the Pin having a vampire cape and
almost like that, right? And and then the female character, she wears like a Chinese.
Oh,
Laura, which is done in noirs. There was a kind of a fashion trend in the 40s of women would just doll up in Chinese.
Yeah, or like kind of like taken to like an exotic level where it's she's the mystery woman, if you will, the one who's not dressed like everyone else. So,
but it is. I mean, Rian Johnson. We can criticize him, but this is really good filmmaking.
Oh yeah,
it's really great. I mean, the bookends of the tunnel and how the clues about that, but shot of her like resting on the car and the car sinks, and then the camera pivots. It's him, but she takes her time knowing that who's touching this car because they're gonna get in trouble, and they realize it's him.
Yeah,
in the parking lot.
I like. It's interesting that you can see that this was a film that was done for cheap, but it doesn't feel cheap, and the parts that do feel cheap almost feel kind of like a heart wrench kind of scene, like that coffee and pie oh my sign on the little coffee shop
printed out,
looks very much printed out of a computer and taped up. Yeah. And I don't know if it was intentional to look like it was a smaller kind of business.
But you get away with that.
It's elements of like we can just sneak that in. I like that they shot in a tunnel. I myself have shot films in a tunnel before.
This is why it sparked my interest to do this movie because we just did Eraserhead, which starts with a tunnel. Yeah.
We're gonna do a series of tunnel movies.
That tunnel movies, right?
But yeah, so I enjoyed that
the introduction that he's in the front entrance and he's mourning her, which is the cover of that, and then he realizes somebody's in there. That was great.
That's very cool. And it's funny that the production designer said that she was told by the city that you can use the tunnel, but it's your own safety that you're putting in because it's a rush off tunnel. So like you're just in danger doing it, but you can do it if you want. And so they're like, hey, that heightens the tension. Let's do it.
Hey, hats off for the actress to lay in there.
Yeah.
Looking messed up and
Yeah. So I initially became aware of the movie because it had people in it that were in Heroes and people in it that were in Lost, which was two shows I was watching at the exact same time as this movie came out. So it kind of had some careers that was mingling in with it. Johnson even had his cousin work on the music, Nathan Johnson.
Which is like those chimes.
For this.
It's like those wind chimes, almost like birds and everything, like wind chimes, almost like Body Heat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's true.
Like a reference about.
Well, and Nathan Johnson actually has gone to do kind of some other different things in the realm. He's worked on a lot of Rian Johnson films, not The Last Jedi. We had our Williams during that, but he was involved in a lot of Rian Johnson's films as a composer, and has actually springboarded into kind of doing other things, especially other noir films. He did Nightmare Alley,
Which is
so he's kind of translated now.
Translated, right? What's your credentials for doing Nightmare Alley? I just did Brick. What's his name?
Here's Brick. Give it a watch.
Yeah. But I think it took a while to write this, even though he started in 2007. I think he has the great concept, but it took a while to. It's definitely been in the oven and baked. It's not a doughy script, and I think he knew where he had to go with it.
Yeah, the story is very. I think the story is a little paint by numbers, but it's also like it
has to be
it's
for
how the story is written. Again, this is not like what the story is, but how you tell it that matters. The parts of this film that are written by him, of course, the whole thing being really, really dynamic, really interesting. I like these like keywords and phrases, and we're kind of looking through the clues with him. And I like that we don't have all the answers. That going into the film, we have very few answers. In fact, I mean, it opens with a tunnel, it opens with a body, and then 2 days earlier, and we're like, oh, so like what's happening?
Yeah, she calls it a phone booth. I love that. I love the phone booth thing, which is kind of weaning off the phone booth when it came out.
Back to the 90s, yeah.
Back to the 90s, but. It's not very flashy filming, but it's very crafted, very well filming. I say it's flashy only when it needs to be. That time with the introduction of Tug.
Yeah.
That's flashy film work right there.
Yeah.
With the fast cut editing that we loved in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when it comes to it, it's cinematography by Steve Yedlin, who of course did Looper with him, did The Last Jedi with him, worked with Johnson quite a few times.
Friend, right.
Yeah, and Yedlin has a good tactic for putting the camera where it needs to be in this film and just leaving it. For the most part, because that makes those flashy moments really stand out. They really
the
like
introduction to him and Tug.
Yeah, that Tug moment, I was like, whoa, what kind of movie am I watching all of a sudden? Because the rest of the film is very stoic, but then again, it's stoic like our lead character. It's only frenetic when our lead character is frenetic. So when he gets in an altercation, we get that like the camera moves as he moves. Whereas most of the time he's standing, he's staring, he's watching, he's looking, he's talking, but he's in one place, and so the camera gets to kind of be our him in the room.
Yeah, and he always has an answer for everything, just like Sam Spade.
Yeah,
just like Sam. What do you want to do? Learn to stutter, because he always has an answer for everything. What are you doing here? Leaving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
leaving.
I really like that he's got Brendan is an interesting character because again he's not entirely likable, which happens a lot in noir.
No.
Our lead character is not always likable, but and the thing about noir is you have to ask yourself. I've noticed, at least from my interactions with you over the years, you have to ask yourself: is this a person I'm wanting to succeed, or is this a person I'm wanting to fail? Because our lead character is not always likable, but sometimes you want him to win and sometimes you want him to lose. And with Brendan, I don't like him very much, but I'm like hoping he figures out the answers. I think he deserves the answers.
And you can probably get the hint that he was very much closeted with Emily, that he probably shut down her world, like, you're just exclusively for me, which is suffocating the relationship, and that's probably why she left. Yeah,
it's a tragic relationship and a tragic character, and that's why the answers that he gets are not going to be good, but they are going to at least close that part of his life.
You have a great, wonderful characters. I like the introduction of Tug. Also, the hierarchy has to go the steps. So he has to not only use his brains, but also get physical with people. Also, which is like another element of noir. So he has to, the football player. He has to get involved with Doug, and then the love triangle. Triangles work, people. Dode and then Tug and then him, which is also not a triangle. It's like a square.
Yeah. There's this like Laura triangle. There's the Emily triangle. There's the Dode triangle. Like there's different, and they're not like, some of them are romantic, some of them are merely like transactional. But there's like multiple triangles. It kind of forms like a nice little like abstract image.
Right, but you sit there and like, oh my god, yeah. Mm-hmm. But yes, and then I like the encounter with gold coffee and pie, oh my, but it's in the back. Instead of David Lynch would put it inside the shop. Well, we're gonna go behind.
David Lynch wants some breakfast though.
breakfast. And then the whole threat of, I got all 6 of my senses and I had a good night's sleep. What the hell are you guys?
Yeah. Well, and I was reading that Johnson's was very focused on creating something that avoided absurdity, that kind of like rode the envelope between
the dialogue
absurd and And what I thought was interesting was there were parts of the movie that, thinking about them after the fact, I was like, well, that was kind of a weird choice, but it didn't feel that way in the movie. There was other moments that I was like, this is too absurd. Like, this is too much. And that's why, I go back to that Richard Roundtree part in The Office. Right. That felt the absurdity.
Why does he have a lamp in his van?
Yeah. But then things like the back of the coffee shop where they meet, or like he meets with the pin, and then they go sit upstairs and his mom serves them orange juice. That part didn't feel absurd to me. It felt like an interesting flavor, but it never like broke that envelope of absurdity.
Right. Yeah. But also like the kernels of the characters. Sometimes it's called dramatic irony.
Oh yeah.
That sometimes we know things that the characters don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when he's having a conversation, Brendan, with the pin, but then he knows something that him and Tug know, that he's kind of, as Tug is observing, and you see him frying up. Right. Yeah.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because again, like, because the story is a little paint by numbers, the dramatic irony is on like an 11, because we kind of know everywhere this movie
right,
is
but it
gonna
tells
go.
you there's going to be a murder, right?
Yeah, we know every step that this movie is pretty much going to take, outside of maybe the finale. Like the climax of the film is probably the only part where we're not sure exactly how it's going to play out, but everything leading up to it, we kind of know all the steps. And so that dramatic irony is at an all-time high, because we understand exactly how it's going to play out. And for some reason, Brendan seems like the kind of protagonist that should know, and he doesn't, and it's infuriating.
When I first started watching it with my wife, she's like, "Who's that guy playing the pin? He looks familiar." And I was like, "If you didn't recognize him, that's the little boy from the movie Witness with Harrison Ford."
See, you go to that. I go to Teenager from Mars Attacks.
Generations. That's why it's fun talking with him. And then we're like, "Oh yeah, the movie Witness. He's the little Amish boy that witnessed the murder that Harrison Ford has to protect."
And then I was kind of like getting through in my head, because of course Lucas Haas worked with Joseph Gordon-Levitt very minutely on Inception. He was in the opening of Inception.
Oh, right!
And they share like a scene together, and that's about it.
Right.
You know, the helicopter scene
Must
at the
have
beginning.
the same agent.
Yeah. And it seems like there's been that kind of recurrence too, and I think that's why I've enjoyed some of Johnson's later work more than his earlier work, because he keeps using the same actors a lot, and he keeps interacting with them, and those relationships get stronger. I'm a huge Last Jedi defender. Deal with it. I think Knives Out is brilliant. This one and Looper, I'm kind of like, it's okay. They're okay. I don't really love them in the same way that I've loved a lot of his later work.
But I think that those two movies realize that sci-fi is kind of not where he wants to do. He wants to go back to Knives Out.
Yeah, I think he wants the aesthetic of sci-fi. Like, he likes the idea of working with any element he can choose, but he's going to tell the story he wants to tell regardless of what the backdrop is. Because that's really what Knives Out and The Last Jedi have, that Brick is kind of like translating to, is there's the story is very simple, it's very realistic, and it's very human. Right. But then he adds these like absurdity things to it and kind of rides that line, and that's where like Brick either works for you or it doesn't.
But it's one of those, what I like about the movie Brick is they'll tell you who's the murderer. In fact, they'll show it to you. Yeah. But you get there and you're still like, oh wow, really? Yeah. It's one of those, like, it doesn't really hide. It's really almost like when you play chess. You can't hide your moves. It's all fair to everybody.
There's no curtain you bring up and you're like, what do they do?
But then when you show the movie, you're like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, and still, I watched the movie and it's like, how is I kind of forget sometimes who is the murderer. But then you really, because there's so many different venues you have to go. It's almost like I watched the movie The Thin Man, where they tell you who the murderer is. I don't care. I love the journey of, Nick and Nora, Charles and Aston, and all the
the journey. Because if the journey's meaningless, the ending is meaningless, because you don't want to go on the journey anyway. Like, and I think I think Johnson's his writing style is really interesting here. Although I will say, if you've never seen the movie before, do what I did: turn on the subtitles like 2 minutes in.
Yes, I recommend.
You will realize that this is a book you're reading, and there's a lot of dialogue. It's high flying. It's fast, and I think the punctuation helps when you're watching the movie for the first time. So when she says things like "bad brick," "the pin," "tug," you can get those little quotation marks around that you can kind of be reading the book along with him. Because this movie is a book report. It's a book of the month club.
I think so. And I think if you had the budget and you did it in the 90s, it would have like grunge music and a soundtrack or something like that. It's very alternative looking.
Yeah. It's a movie of a time.
Alternative music looking.
That also kind of feels like it's ignoring a time. I compare it to the movie It Follows, because It Follows has that same thing where like it feels like it could be the 90s, but then one character has a cell phone, but it's not a normal cell phone. So it's like it feels like it's a futuristic cell phone in a movie that looks like it was filmed in the 90s. So like it misses that time period, and that's kind of again like if you start writing something in 97 and you make it in 2007, and you kind of utilize stuff from both of those time periods, the movie feels like it's removed from time, even though it kind of has a placement.
Yeah. So what I think Rian Johnson explained is he wrote the script after film school, and then his cinematographer was getting work immediately. That's how good he was, and they were best friends. And then when he'd go on other film sets, they would just throw this script out on film set. Hey, anybody interested? And I think it took a couple of years, because I think they finished up film school like in late '90s. It took about 4 or 5 years to get at least some kind of a budget.
Yeah, he was. I think it was 6 years was the number I read, and then he actually got a bunch of his funding from his own parents. Which, you know what, support your kids.
And then it came out in South by Southwest, and people applauded by Southwest because that's college age kids who just kind of graduate. They kind of have the demographic that you want to like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was one of the first movies that I recall hearing about, like how it was doing on the festival circuit. This was one of the first major films that I remember somebody was like, "Oh, did you hear about Brick?" And I'm like, "What is this thing?" And like I was working at a gas station with a little movie
It's
wall.
about Maces. What the hell, right?
Yeah. And I remember like hearing about this movie and like seeing the like the little DVD case was sitting on our rental wall at my work, and I was like, I should get that. And I just kept putting it off, and I've never heard anything bad about it. Most people who I've talked to loved it, and I think that's kind of that festival kind of like people talk about it.
It is kind of a very film festival kind of a film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's probably Johnson has a career because this thing got in a film festival. Because this movie, had it just been released, looks like it would have been almost a direct-to-video if he hadn't gotten some sort of festival love from it. Probably would have made direct-to-video, had a flash for a little bit, and then just kind of disappeared. And maybe resurface on a Netflix 10, 15 years later.
And we talk about elevated things. I think this is actually elevated cult film.
Okay.
I don't think it's like a cult classic. I think it's one of those elevated cult films. We talk about Eraserhead is very much a cult film, but I think you get in very slick kind of a version of Brick. Talk about Brick. It's very much like an elevated cult classic. Almost.
Yeah, that's why I say like it's a whisper movie. Like you don't hear about it in general circles of people. You hear about it from film fans who are like, you should check out.
And that's not a complaint of mine. It's just an observation. And I'm sure if I had to do a top 10 list in 2007 when this came out, it would have been in my top 10. And it's still probably, I did a top 2 of the 2000s. I would probably put it in my top 10. That's how much I liked it. And it's probably because I loved noirs as much as Rian Johnson did. I know the source material where he's deriving from, and he hits all those checkpoints of Brendan he's almost the anti-hero. He's not the blazing hero, but he's also not really the greatest, nicest guy. And you got all these, you got to fight your way out of it, and you got to keep everybody out of bay. And even when you solve the crime, it's not really nice.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not even really nice. It's not even a nice day.
And it ends in such a place. I won't ruin the final reveal of the film, but it ends in such a place where you're like, I was down before, and now I'm really down. Like it really pushes you down. So
but that was clever change because he had him in a white shirt, and it's like from a year ago, and he's all spruced up, and then you see him now, and it's almost like oh my God, that's the transition. He's actually messed up.
Yeah, he's actually been through the ringer. He's come out on the other end, and he looks worse for the wear. Right. But maybe I think it's the first time he's really changed clothing though.
I don't think he's done laundry. Yeah.
Someone said that Joseph Gordon-Levitt prefers wearing clothes that have been worn already. When he's in a movie, he prefers to wear something that's been worn down. And I can see that in this movie. So for me, I thought it was okay. I didn't love it. I think it's a movie that requires a rewatch, and I think on a second watch, there are certain things I might take away from it more.
Yeah.
But I really like the idea of taking a noir film out of the noir world and putting it somewhere else. It's kind of like
a high school in California.
It's kind of like how I'm always saying, like, I like the current idea of taking a superhero idea and putting it in a different genre. Because that's not its own genre. Noir is kind of a style, if you will, in a lot of ways.
It is. It's
that
mostly
we think of as a genre.
It's not a genre. It's a style.
Yeah, and so if we take that style and apply it to a different subgenre, like the high school movie, the teen movie, if you will, we can find some different things in there. So I like that a lot. I also don't feel that the film hits that school setting well enough.
It's got that plateau.
Yeah.
It does have kind of a plateau, like, hey, and then it kind of...
Yeah, but I think though the movie's stylistically great, I don't know if the story really grabbed me because it felt a little bit like I've seen this before. So for me, a little bit of a mixed bag. I'm kind of just, it's okay.
Yeah. But it's a good launching pad. It's really, for an independent film that hardly had any finance, you really see some talent being played out, especially with editing too.
Yeah, and being able to track that, like Johnson doing this, and then the Brothers Bloom, and then Looper, and then having this like incredible run of some of the best television directing I've ever seen on Breaking Bad before really launching out into what he wants to do.
But if you didn't know Rian Johnson, like how did The Last Jedi director all of a sudden go from Knives Out? You're realizing he's going back to
Yeah, he said after he was done, he's like, I wanted to do something a little bit more removed from like the giant green screen. I wanted to take a smaller approach before I do something big, and I was like, I'm all for that. And then like being able to see how Knives Out feels like a translation from Brick,
Yes.
but it feels like a translation with a whole lot more money and a whole lot more backing because it's such a stylistically different movie.
So, have you seen Brick?
Yeah, let us know in the comment section down below your thoughts on Brick, and hey, let us know your thoughts on Rian Johnson. Let's keep the hating to a little bit of a lowdown, but a friendly discussion, all pretty solid here. What's your favorite Rian Johnson film? Are you a fan of kind of the newer stuff, the Knives Out stuff?
Well, after
or
you
are
reveal the
on
secret
this?
of Apple iPhones in movies, how the bad guys cannot have operate iPhones, watch Brick, and then you really don't know because nobody's having an iPhone.
No one has anything. That's actually fair. I'd like to see a movie where the bad guy carries an orange phone, where it's like a different fruit and they just mess with you. Let us know your thoughts on iPhones and how they appear in movies too. And while you're down there, don't forget to give us a like. It's something simple and free that you can do that helps support the channel, and something that you can do that's a little less free but very much supportive is.
I have a challenge for Hollywood.
What's that?
How about Rian Johnson writes a script that James Gunn directs?
Think
Or
James Gunn would let that happen?
No. I don't think James Gunn would write a script that Rian Johnson would direct either.
Yeah. I tell you what, let's go back to that idea of having like the two filmmakers that make a 45-minute movie, like Quicksilver Highway or Two Evil Eyes, where they each make a short film.
Right.
That they kind of had to
That's
work on
what I
each
would
other.
like. Yeah, let's do it that way.
There we go. Bring back the Grindhouse series.
Yes.
But hey, if you've got a couple bucks to spare and you don't mind dropping one of your coffees for the month, go ahead and check out the
Coffee and
Patreon
Pie
link down
online.
below. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go to Coffee and Pie, get a discount coffee, and then come and spend your money to support independent filmmakers and content creators like ourselves.
Yep.
And there you have it. So you can find all my film reviews at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, where I interview filmmakers from around the Twin Cities and greater Minnesota area, anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go check out the comment section, huh?
Oh,
It's gonna be a good one.
yeah.